Kristi, Clover, thank you for joining us here to talk about how to start homeschooling. Now, this sounds very simple, but I, as a parent, get very intimidated when I hear the word how to start homeschooling. As good as my intentions were to do it a couple of years ago, I did not do it. I ended up enrolling my kids in a private school, but how to start homeschooling can be scary. You are a homeschool veteran for 15 years. You are the author of a few books, one of them being Homeschool Basics. You're a popular convention speaker. And the best part of it is that you have actually lived through this and walked the walk by homeschooling count it, five kids at home, and two of them are graduated, yes?
Yes. I kind of joke that our homeschool experiment worked. So we have two kids that have actually graduated. So now I'm like, I'm only homeschooling three. So
Child's play, no big deal, right? I know. Well, listen, you're the right person to talk us through this, because the number one question that we get from many parents saying, I want to homeschool, but I can't, but it's not going to work for me. They say they don't know where to start.
Mhm.
And that's what this how-to is all about, how to start. And then the secondary follow-up is, I'm pretty sure my children and I would kill each other, ha ha ha, if we tried homeschooling. So you're going to walk us through this. And I want to start with number one, the withdrawal. How do you officially withdraw kids from school? What is the process?
Oh, great question. And it's kind of an odd thing, but I have experience with public school, with private school, and with withdrawing my students. And I'm actually in California. So California laws are different. And that is the one thing I think to start with, is that every single state in the United States of America, it is 100% legal to homeschool. You can homeschool your kids. So that is the most important thing. However, every state is different. So every state has different guidelines about how to pull your kids out. So here in California, there's like a 3-day truancy period that you need to be aware of. So in California, the way you do it is that you send a letter into your school as the parent saying, I'm withdrawing my student, and they're going to be enrolling in, and you name your homeschool. And then that's all you have to do on that end. And then your next letter, so just 2 letters in California, it's super easy. Your next letter is you as the school asking for their formal records, and then you become the record keeper. So it's pretty easy in most states. The number one recommendation I have for people is to use the resource of Homeschool Legal Defense Association. They go by the acronym HSLDA, and there are homeschool lawyers, essentially. They're there for you, helping you know exactly what your state laws are, what you need to do to withdraw. But in most states, it's pretty easy. And especially if you have a school that is homeschool friendly. We had a very homeschool friendly public school. And if you don't, then I highly recommend talking to HSLDA before even thinking about, sending those letters in. But the most important thing is not to keep your kid home and then be like, oh, I'll get to, sending in those letters. You want to make sure you do it legally, and it's really easy, and it's not a hard, most HSLDA has templates like where you're literally like, insert your name here. And so it's not like you have to come up with even the verbiage. So it's
Okay,
really easy.
that's good to know. And again, you said there's a 3-day truancy, particularly here for California. So
Yes.
when you send in that letter saying I'm withdrawing my student, you send it to the school and the school district, but then you cannot keep them home for more than 3 days without having some kind of an educational plan and a home school that they are enrolled in, right?
Kind of, yes.
Did I understand?
You're like, oh, you're so close. And actually, in California, you only have to send a letter to the school. So you send a letter to the school, not the school district. And again, California laws. And it just has to be that you can't keep your kid home for more than 3 days before giving that letter to the school, because the school needs to make sure that they know where your kid is, because they're still legally responsible for your kid. Ironically,
I gotcha.
You're responsible.
Okay. I gotcha. Okay, so then this leads me to point number 2,
Yes.
establishing your school, because you just said that when you send in that letter to the school, you've got to say, my child will now be attending this school. But if you're homeschooling, there is no name to the school. So what does it mean to
Yes.
establish your school. Describe that process. We, the parents, are establishing our own school in our house.
Yes. So that's what's cool is that, and I always tell people, I'm like, own your school. Don't think of it like a public school at home. But yeah, so you establish your own school. You create a name. You can, I mean, when we first started, our school name was the Clover Academy because we're the Clover family. So it was just this cutesy little name. But when my boys were getting ready to enter high school, I'm like, I don't want their high school transcript to be like, here is, Grant Clover from Clover Academy. So we changed the name of our school and made it sound a little more official. And that was really easy to do. In California, we fill out an affidavit. We have October 1st to the 15th that you have to submit an affidavit to become a private school. And actually, that's how we homeschool here in California. Ironically, it's going to surprise most of your viewers. California is one of the easiest states to homeschool in. But as far as establishing your school, there's set things. Every state has their own laws. But one thing that always surprises people is that none of the states require the parent to be a credentialed teacher. You do not have to be a credentialed teacher to homeschool your kids here in the United States. You also do not have to accredit your homeschool in any way. So that's what's amazing is that homeschooling really is, we try to complicate it because it sounds really complicated, but it's so easy. So you're creating a school name, you're keeping those records that you've been received from the school. If you're starting in kindergarten, then you get to start from scratch. And in fact, in California, kindergarten's not even mandatory. So it's crazy how easy it is when you understand what your state laws are to just kind of follow those. And so establishing your school is not difficult at all.
I'm literally in shock right now because you hear all these stories about how enrolling your child in a private school, you need to make sure that that school is accredited, legitimately so. You're not just going to send your child off to an institution that has zero know-how or accountability. But the fact that you do not have to be accredited as a homeschool is something that I don't think a lot of people know. I'm obligated to ask this question. Does not being accredited as a homeschool in your home, teaching your children, does that have any negative ramifications when you do start applying to colleges if you want to go that route?
No, not at all. In fact, most colleges will readily accept homeschool students because they know the really amazing thing about homeschooling is that when you're stuck in things that your kids learn how to learn. So they figure out, how to solve problems, especially at the high school level. So many colleges are well aware of this and they love having homeschool students come in because they know that they're really self-motivated and they're independent learners and they're independent thinkers. So that's an important element too that we kind of lose in the public school system often.
Yeah. I mean, we've definitely seen that happen. Okay. I want to jump to tip number 3. And you mentioned this earlier, keeping records. And then I also want you to talk about learning schedules because it's very different. And you now, the parent, are the end-all teacher. And so describe how you keep a schedule that keeps people productive, and also how do you keep records, because that is a very important part of making sure you're proving that your kids are learning, right?
Yes. So those are both really important things. So again, I feel like my blanket statement, every state is different. So you need to find out what your state requires. Here in California, you have to be able to demonstrate that learning has happened. So I typically take samples from the beginning, a few from the middle of the school year, and then one at the end. My little hack for most parents is that you're using a curriculum. They almost always have a table of contents. So I always photocopy the table of contents and put that in with my records because that's showing exactly what we're using. So that's one of the key things for keeping records. Again, every state's different, but I just want to be able to show that my kids have learned. So that's usually not difficult when, especially in the early years when their penmanship is a little messy and a little wiggly. And then by the end of the year, you show that they're actually writing a full sentence. It's really exciting.
You can read it. It looks great.
Oh, yeah. And in math is really easy to show. You're like, they're starting with the basics and they're ending on something just that blows your mind. So it's really fascinating. And when you think about the fact that okay, this is going to blow. Okay, ready? I'm like, you are sitting
Yeah,
down.
I'm ready. I'm ready.
You're ready. So in California, we are not legally required to grade or take grades or to give grades. So for a
Well,
transcript, yeah,
that
right?
actually does not surprise me given how many schools have abandoned
Right?
standardized grading. Yeah, I've actually, okay, I gotcha.
I know. And I say that because what's really interesting is most of the time you're grading students in a classroom setting in public schools to get funding.
Mhm.
Teachers have no way of knowing where all 30 to 35 kids are at any particular time. But you as the parent are usually sitting right next to your kid. And so you can, I mean, that is the beauty, is that you can teach your kid at the level they're at. So that's where homeschooling has such an amazing advantage. I'm looking at my kids' strengths, and I'm kind of a student of my child. I'm looking for the strengths that I can just be like, ooh, look, they are really good. They're really showing. Like my oldest loved writing. And so he ended up wanting to be a writer. And so he's got a great job now where he gets to do some copy editing in it. And then my next son, who graduated, was showing just an incredible passion for photography. So we were able to include that in his homeschool as well. And so you're literally doing on the job training and helping them with that, but as well as with the weaknesses. You're playing around with like, what other curriculums can I use? What other things can I get in there to help them to understand this? As far as
Where do you find,
no, go ahead, ask me a
I
question.
had to jump in.
Yeah.
I want to jump in. Where do you find curriculum?
Okay, so that's almost the problem, is that now there is so much amazing curriculum out there that it's almost overwhelming how much is out there. So I have a list on my website where I share like the different curriculum we've used, what I like about them, but there are so many wonderful curriculums. It's really just a Google away. But I always recommend for people to get to a homeschool convention, because they typically have vendor halls where you can look at the homeschool curriculum. You can flip through, see what it's like. And honestly, that's what's also really unique, is that if one curriculum isn't a great fit for your kid, try a different one. Don't stay stuck. If you're having that like butting heads moment, sometimes it's the curriculum. Sometimes their learning style is, just needing a little bit of a different tweak. And sometimes you can tweak the curriculum to make that work. But there's so many great curriculum out there. And just ask, when you go to a homeschool convention, you can ask questions there of the speakers, of the different vendors, of the different people involved. And getting into a homeschool community is also helpful, because you can be like, what do you use for math? What do you use for phonics? So a lot of it's just trial and error, but there's so many resources out there.
I'm curious to know what your schedule is. What is the day to day?
Okay.
And do children need to fix their beds before they go to school at your house?
Are they supposed to? Yes. Do I have some? Yes. Do all of them? No. When we first started, I was like, okay, so at 8:00 we do this, and at 9:00 we're doing this. And I used to be really good at doing room checks before, but it really comes down to prioritizing. That's not important to me. I really don't care I would love for their bed to be made every morning. And if that is your got to have it done, then do it. Create some accountability for that. But with our schedule, I love that my kids can sleep in. Our kids don't get a lot of sleep. And so that I think is really important for brain development as well. So I let my kids sleep in. We kind of have an official start at 9. But most of my kids do actually get up early and start working either independently. Like my junior high, actually, he's going into high school. So my middle son is going into high school this year. And he kind of created his own little routine. He likes to get up early. He reads all of his chapter books, because we use a curriculum that is very book based. So he's reading different stories to learn history. He's reading different books to learn, all those different fundamentals that we're trying to teach for him. He did American history last year, and it was just so fun, because he's reading stories about, George Washington and all of these different neat things. So they learn so much better when they're reading biographies and story-based things. So anyway, so he wakes up and
we have a lot of biographies at PragerU Kids.
I know. I actually just watched them the other day. It was so good. I love that you guys are going through all the presidents. In fact, I was thinking, I'm like, I smell summer school.
It's a good summer school or all year round school. I'm not going to lie. Anyway, continue. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh no. So with scheduling, it's what works for your family and what works for you. I actually really encourage people to do more routines than to schedule. I also have a homeschool organization course that helps people to really fine tune it to be more efficient in their day. But with just the basics for routines, I try to figure out, and here's the best hack. What are you not getting to, or what does your kid struggle with the most? That's what your first subject of the day is, because that's when they're fresh. That's when they're ready to learn. And so you'll kind of tweak things, because you'll start off your homeschool like, okay, so we're going to do these different, subjects in the morning. And usually you're pretty much done by lunch. My high schoolers go a little bit longer, and that's more independent. My personal rule in our school is that we have anything that requires mom's help to be done before lunch, and anything that's independent, we save. So they can, of course, be working on that. But if they have any extra work, then that after lunch period is really more for their independent learning.
I like that. So it is true that you can get a quote unquote full day's work done before lunch, because I think that's one of the myths that, many people who have not looked into homeschooling think is, oh, wow, I am going to be there with my children at the kitchen table for 6 hours. And that's simply not true.
Yeah, no, if that is happening, there's probably something going on. You're probably doing too much. That's one of the things that I really try to help people with, is looking for, do you have gaps in what you're trying to learn, or do you have overlap? And more often than not, because we are so paranoid about keeping up with grade level, what will the neighbors think? We have all this external pressure and internal pressure we put on ourselves. We tend to do too much. So typically that's when you're going past lunch. So, kindergarten should take an hour, really a couple hours for basic elementary. As you get into junior high, there's sometimes some work that gets done in the afternoon. But with high school, my kids always complain, like, Mom, it's 2 and I'm still finishing my work. I'm like, do you realize they have been working harder down the street from an earlier time, and they're still there. So, and they're going to come home to homework. So there is so much extra time. And that's what's neat, because you can, again, help your kids figure out what other interests they have. And it's kind of, what is it, that 10,000 hour? Isn't that the thing, like 10,000 hours helps you to master something? So you can start working on that in your home.
That's incredible. Okay. Tough questions. Okay. What happens when you start homeschooling your child and you run into an unexpected challenge? Maybe there's a learning delay. Maybe you're explaining a particular concept every which way you know how, and your child is still not understanding it. There's no teacher's aide. There's no principal. There's no, support admin to go to. Who do you go to if you run into a challenge teaching your child? What do you do?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is where it's fascinating, because as a homeschool parent, I always joke that it takes about 3 years for you to let go of that public school mindset of, they have to be at grade level, they have to have all these things done. Your kids, their brains are capable of learning so much. But sometimes, especially in those early years, some kids, they're just not ready to learn all of their phonics, to learn how to read. And you just keep reintroducing things. It's when we put those external pressures of the book says they're supposed to be able to read chapter books by, the first grade. If you just keep introducing it to your kids and really working on the fundamentals, oftentimes they'll catch up. And not only do they does it click, but then they just explode. If they really know those fundamentals, they will catch up. And it's real, I hate even saying catch up, because they're not behind. They're just not quite ready for it. And then you can teach to that. So you give your kids some space to learn. And then you can try a different curriculum. But this is where you think outside the box with homeschooling. So math is the biggest question I get. It's what do I do when they have to learn geometry or algebra or, heaven forbid, trigonometry?
Because that's real. If you put a trigonometry worksheet in front of me right now, clueless.
Oh, yeah. No, and my kids like my son is always laughing at me because we have this joke because I always go to the teacher manual and I'm trying to figure out like, okay, it's been a while. So I'm trying to figure it out. And if I figure it out, I'm like, math genius. And then so I'll make my kids refer to me as like the math genius for the rest of the day. But again, like there's the teacher's manuals, there's Google it online, but you have people in your life and we forget that. That's a lost art. You probably haven't someone who's an engineer. They're pretty good at math. So why not invite them over, set up a lunch date for your kid to take them out to lunch and just pick their brain. So that's been what's been really neat is seeing how our kids are learning how to get those answers. And again, I wouldn't make my 5-year-old like, go find out how to read from this person. Like, I can read, but sometimes they just learn differently. And so again, you become a student of your child and you're looking for those different things. As far as special needs or different developmental things, there are so many resources out there. There's a lot of special needs homeschool resources. You can find that on that HSLDA website I mentioned before. Most states also have a homeschool hub. So like out here, CHIA, so it stands for Christian Home Educators Association. They have a ton of resources. They usually know who has support groups. They link to different, resources that are available. So most states do have some sort of a homeschool help line, and it's just a Google away. And I've learned that number one, I didn't realize how many educational gaps I had until I started homeschooling because I'm like, ooh, I'm learning this with you. I don't remember
Right.
this. And then also you just find that like you become really good at figuring things out. And you start kind of seeing like, is this a parenting issue? Because you mentioned that at the start of this, like, I'm going to kill my kids are going to kill
Right.
me, or my kids are going to kill each other. And
Correct.
Right. It's like there's murder like everywhere. But, it really does force you to get on top of parenting issues. It's hard, but I think I've heard parents say like, man, like I can't figure this out with my kid. I just give them to the teachers. They'll figure it out. And the teachers don't have time to figure out your kid, but you do. So that's where you can separate it out. Is this a school thing? Is this a parenting thing? Is this a character issue? Like, sometimes your kids are learning character during a math problem because life is challenging. And so when you can come alongside them and help them to learn that it's okay to be frustrated, it's totally fine. And we had a funny story that happened this year. I have never done this, but we have this like bonus page in our math curriculum that kind of makes them think, think in a different way. So it's introducing new concepts, using some older concepts, and it always flusters my kids. And my daughter had just kind of had it. And so she's like, I'm never going to learn this. I'm never going to like figure this out. She's panicking. Right. I'm like, this is how important it is. I grabbed a piece of paper, put it in a pot, and I set it on fire. I'm like, you don't need to know it. I don't want you to know it. And she's like, what? But it was just one of those moments where I'm like, she needs to realize like, you don't have to know everything. You're going to learn that next year. It's okay. But,
Wow.
I kind of come in and comfort her in that and be like, it's okay. You don't need to be perfect all the time. And so, each kid has their own little thing that they're working through. But that's the beautiful.
It is. That's it.
Yeah. It's a great lesson.
Mm-hmm. It's a great lesson. True or false?
Yes.
A full-time parent can homeschool their child effectively.
Absolutely.
Let me repeat that. True or false? A full-time working parent can effectively homeschool their child.
True. Absolutely true.
Describe, please.
Describe. Yes. So that's what I felt like my job became during COVID. I was hosting like a webinar, how to homeschool your kids. And a lot of it was trying to help people understand that for that, it really does come down to, that is when you're looking at your scheduling. How are you managing your time? What are your state requirements? Honestly, one of the harder things than just, being a work at home or a working parent is when you have non-readers in the home. You've got little tiny kids that you're also juggling. So there's lots of ways to juggle different learning levels. Homeschooling when you've got toddlers who just want to be running around and playing, and when you're working at home. So I hate to do it's a shameless plug, but that's exactly why I created my homeschool organization course is because I really wanted to hold parents' hands and show them, where are you overlapping? Because we do tend to do too much. And how can you use like one curriculum to fit 3 subjects? So oftentimes, like a writing curriculum is also going through history. And then so you can base your vocabulary, you can base your, all the different elements of language arts and history, and hey, throw in some Bible as well. And you can conquer that with one curriculum versus having to get 3 or 4 different curriculums to cover that. So you just have to get more creative when you are, a work at home or a working parent. But it is absolutely possible. I see it all the time.
Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your insight. Where can everyone find you online? Because this was just a little snip of the solutions that you give. So where can people find you online if they need more in-depth hand-holding?
Well, the best place is my website, kristiclover.com. I have links everywhere there. I have a free little digital book that I give away, and then all of my resources are there, from courses to the freebies. I've got all kinds of resources over there for both just parents looking for help in their home, because often it's, okay, I'm homeschooling. What about laundry? How am I feeding people? And so I have lots of tips for all of those, kind of life management. So I like to help people through all of that. So that's where they can find me, at kristiclover.com. I'm also online. I have both a YouTube channel. I'm on Instagram, not on Facebook, even though it looks like it, but Instagram or YouTube. And I'm at Kristi Clover there as well.
Excellent. All right, Kristi Clover. Thank you again. And for everyone watching or listening, if you have not subscribed to PragerUkids.com already, it's free. We do have resources for kids and parents, homeschool parents too. Yes, we do have lesson plans forthcoming, and we have tons of videos to help educate our kids with knowledge and history and civics, so that we can grow informed, so that they can grow into informed citizens, because that's the object of the game, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Okay, see you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.